Hello, all you skibbies. This is Great Answer. My pronouns are he, him, and I am coming to you from the rope bondage capital of the world, Madison, Wisconsin, with another episode of the Ropecast. After a recent episode, I had a listener who I also have interviewed, Rigger Otis, say, "Hey, I'm glad you went back to the original format," which was, of course, interviewing people. And now that I've gotten that positive feedback, I'm going to throw it out the window because this podcast is just going to be me rambling. So if you're waiting to hear who my special guest is, it's me. And if you don't want to listen to me talking about stuff for about half an hour, then you should go find a different podcast. Can I recommend People of Kink? That's a really good podcast. And so is Rain DeGray's Dirty Talk podcast. That's another really good one that I'd recommend. You could also just do a search and find anywhere that Twisted Monk has been interviewed for a podcast. You'll find some Ropecasts there. You'll find him on other places. And Twisted Monk is, of course, one of the sponsors of this podcast. See how smoothly I went into the sponsor acknowledgement? TwistedMonk.com. They are getting set to release their Valentine's edition of Rope. I love that he doesn't do Christmas specials, but boy, he knows where his bread is buttered, and he is very good about setting up good Valentine-flavored, themed, whatever you want to call it, packages. So if you are looking for that special rope to use, I would recommend it. I also had the privilege of getting to use some brand new, fresh Twisted Monk rope recently here at our local club at Freya, and I can tell you that I haven't used a brand new piece of Twisted Monk rope in a while, and it is every bit as much fun as I remembered. It was a beautiful kind of a burgundy color. Dye was excellent, and the rope dye went really well, so definitely recommend it. And even if you don't buy his rope or any of the other amazing things on his site, please just let him know that you appreciate him supporting the Ropecast. Speaking of supporters of the Ropecast, there is also my Patreon patrons. Thank you so much for the continued support. I know that the work here has gone different directions than we initially planned when I launched the Patreon, so I'm very grateful for people that have stuck around, even as we tend to do more sketchnoting and things like that. But the podcast is still here, and if you want to help support and defray the costs of server hosting and the equipment, I just recently used some of the money to invest in a new microphone for my in-the-field interviews. And I would love to have your support at patreon.com/greatanswer. And yes, you do get special little things coming, little bonuses and things like that if you are a patron. Finally, I'd like to thank Lee Allure. LeeAllure.com is an erotic hypnosis website, and she is a specialist and a very creative one. She also makes soap. Spiralized Soap is her soap company. And it's kind of funny how, of course, it's a natural progression. You go from being a erotic hypnotist to adding in soap to things. I can tell you that we both love her soap, and also we really, really like her hypnosis work. I have had her work with me on various hypnotizing situations, and I can tell you I definitely think it works. Not even the erotic stuff. She also does the regular hypnosis stuff, and that has helped me out. If you ever are surprised at an event where I remember people's names better than I used to, I can tell you that is entirely due to her help. So please visit LeeAllure.com and check out the various things she has to offer there. All right, now I could sit here and talk about the GRU that's coming up in February, but you know where that is, gru.space. I could talk about how Ropecraft tickets are on sale, but you know where that is too, ropecraft.net. You know this stuff. So instead, we're going to go, for the first podcast of 2019, we are going to go into 3 things that tops need to stop doing in 2019. And yes, I am saying tops. I could say cishet white male tops if I wanted to really drill down to the demographic that I can speak to. But I feel comfortable in saying that these are things that a lot of tops in general need to stop doing. Now, if I am not talking to you, if you're going to come to me with a not all tops thing, guess what? If you don't already do these things, then this podcast is not for you. Except I will tell you, I guarantee you that number 3 definitely applies to you, regardless of who you are. Okay, but I tell you, there are 3 things, and one of them is easy, one of them is going to be kind of hard, and one of them is going to be really, really hard, because we get into Dunning-Kruger territory there. But let's go with the easy one first, okay? The number one thing that tops need to stop doing in 2019 is assuming pronouns, okay? We are done with the argument about whether or not you can use they as a singular and things. I mean, it's been proven. Shakespeare did it. If Shakespeare wrote it that way, you don't have an excuse not to. Nor do we have the excuse that we just can't adjust to it, because we know that if you see a baby and they're dressed in purple and you say, oh, what's his name? And the person says, oh, it's a she, you don't have any trouble switching that to a she. So really, it's just a matter of needing to get used to it. And you need to stop assuming that people already have it based on their appearance. For example, when you hear my mellifluous baritone voice, you should not assume that I use masculine pronouns, except that I did announce that at the very beginning. Hi, my name's Great Answer. I use he, him pronouns. Okay, that gives you the exact thing. And that's the way you should introduce yourself all the time. All the time. Anytime. Well, maybe not all the time. Maybe not, when you're about to, maybe when you're about to start negotiating for a scene or something like that. But definitely if you are talking to a group or anything like that. Which brings me to a subtext of this. Okay, not only should you come out and always, the minute you say your name, you should also immediately say your pronouns, even if you've never had it. You've never been mistaken, never had anyone use the wrong pronoun for you, it normalizes it. It makes people go, oh yeah, okay, good, I know what to do. And when someone else says, my pronouns are they, them, again, it normalizes it. But also, if you are addressing a crowd of people, don't do the old ladies and gentlemen. Okay? I mean, hell, if you need to, you can do ladies and gentle them. That was a one that I saw online that was pretty funny. My personal favorite is just to say something like, I won't say favorite yet. Other people have suggested things like saying, hello, friends, or all you folks, glad you're here, or something along those lines, something that is gender neutral. But, or hey, all you skebes. I'm pretty sure that skebe is a gender neutral term, although I think it is maybe usually termed dirty old man. I need to have a Japanese speaking person let me know if that is gender specific or not. But my personal favorite that I plan on using the next time I address a crowd is to look over the crowd and say, as I look over all of you gathered here today, I can see my assassins have failed. And, you get people's attention, you're making the greeting, and you're not assuming gender, okay? It's just really, really, it's done. It's 2019, you know what Twitter is, and you know not to assume gender, okay? That's it. We're done with that. No more arguing about it. No more, but I'm just used to that, okay? Too bad. You weren't used to Twitter before it came around. You got used to it. Get used to it, all right? Now for the hard one. Number 2. I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this, but I think maybe the best way to do it is to say, stop pretending that romance isn't dead. Now, when I say romance is dead, or maybe I should say stop being romantic, let me explain what I mean by this. A while back, when I was doing more writing of erotica, I was being approached by people who were involved in the erotic romance genre. And I wrote them a story, and they sent back and said, hey, the sex is really hot in this. Can you please add more romance? Now, I thought I had written a romance. I'm like, well, what's the why? What do you mean add more romance? What's romance anyway? So I went out and I tried to find some romantic movies and things. Say, okay, what is it that makes things romantic? Now, I figured out that there are basically 3 ingredients to romance. And the first one is miscommunication. The second one is overreaction to miscommunication. And the third one is long smoldering looks. Okay, that's basically what are the ingredients of a romantic movie. The way you see this play out in the scene and what needs to stop happening is that you have people over and over again and I'm not even, regardless of gender, but oftentimes it is, almost always it is to top, people will assume that the person really wants it. Okay, that oh well, I could tell from the way they were doing it that it would be okay because their body said yes, or they will say, well, this is I could just tell the moment was right, and I should go ahead and do, and usually it's something sexual, but not even that. It's just any kind of boundary crossing thing. The magical romantic myth is that people's eyes meet across the room and they come together and they kiss each other and everything is beautiful and they don't even have to ask first. That time is done. It's 2019. Unfortunately, while sometimes that does work out, and yes, I've had it work out. I confess there was a party I had years and years and years ago where I sat down on a couch or a kind of a love sack kind of thing with someone I did not know. We were both happened to be naked. Just that was part of the party. And we were both watching a different scene. And it went from sitting down next to each other to snuggling to cuddling to actually literally fisting. And I won't say who fisted who, but I will just say that it went all that way without anything but body language. It was wonderful. Afterwards, we introduced ourselves. We were all really happy. It was everything was great. That kind of thing was lucky. Okay, that was luck. That was not the way things are supposed to be. And for every one thing like that happens, there are a zillion other mistaken, hurt, and problematic situations. We're becoming more aware of that now throughout 2018. And guess what? It's done. We cannot assume that anymore. Do the awkward asking. Hey, is it okay if? Or can I do this thing? And if you have not gotten permission for it, and haven't gotten permission for like mid-scene changing of the plans, just don't do it. Hey, it's done. We are not, just don't assume it. Don't think, oh, hey, I'm going to rock their world by going on further. Or God, worst of all, don't go like, oh, well, this may be the only chance we get to do whatever, and then do it, okay? Because first of all, it won't be your only chance. And second of all, even if it is, you are risking way more by going and assuming permission than not. So just stop doing that. Stop trying to be romantic and pushing the boundaries and things like that, unless it's already been collaboratively agreed that that's where the scene is going. And even if that has been collaboratively agreed, realize that if you are playing that way, part of the risk that you're running is that you are going to violate someone's consent. And if that happens, don't go like, well, they said I could do that. No, you just had that. It's like, you're going to suspend somebody, you're running the risk of it falling. You don't sit there and say, well, that's not my fault, that's gravity's fault. Hey, well, okay, you might say that. Bad analogy, Gray. No biscuit. We'll obviously fix this in post. The better way to put it is that if you go up there, you say, well, how was I to know they were going to fall? Well, the way you know they might fall is that it's a suspension. And in a suspension, people might fall. Okay? So remember, 2019, romance is dead. Now, I mean that in a romance as it has been colloquially understood in like bodice ripper books and things like that. I'm not saying you can't be romantic, okay? People have their own personal ideas of what is romantic. I think it's romantic when Naya brings me a cup of coffee, okay? That's romance. And another partner thinks it's romantic when I lay out her cereal bowl and cereal in the morning. I mean, that's just part of, that can be what it is. I'm not saying you can't find your own ways of being romantic. Just don't subscribe to the movie or book version of it, okay? That part needs to be done. And I say that as we hear over and over again, people who are good educators, people who are, strong parts of the community and things like that, and yet they make this same mistake. They go beyond the boundaries because they think that, oh, hey, it'll be okay. It used to be overlooked. It was never okay. But 2019, you're not going to get away with it. So just stop trying and start, communicating more. All right. So that's the second thing. The third thing, and this is the one that does apply to everybody. So if you've gotten the first two and you've been like, I already do that. I always announce my own pronouns. I never assume other people's pronouns. And I completely always make sure that I only do the things that are already agreed upon, and I never ever have to worry about being pushed through hormones or the heat of the moment into something that I shouldn't do. Never have to worry about that. This is number 3, and this one definitely applies to you. And that is, tops, you need to stop pretending you already know this stuff. Okay? Because these are not personal problems necessarily. I mean, for some people, yes, they are. It's a systemic problem, okay? And when I say this stuff, I'm not just talking about these first two things. I'm talking about the issues of racism. I'm talking about issues of sexism. I'm talking about internalized toxic masculinity. I'm talking about all those things that are just kind of ingrained in our culture, and we were raised with it. And I can give you a perfect example of this. If Naya and I are going to present at an event, and they want us both to present separate classes, I expect the person to talk to Naya about the classes that they want her to teach and talk to me about the classes they want me to teach. And then they can talk to both of us about classes they want us to teach together. But we both tend to get irritated if people just assume that because we're in a power exchange relationship or something like that, automatically I'm the one who decides everything and stuff like that. Like I'm like, she is an independent woman on her own and entirely self-sufficient as an educator. And we pretty strongly believe in that, and we will politely correct people in public, and between the two of us we will literally rant and rave about, can you believe they did that thing? And guess what? In the process of going through Ropecraft presenters, there was a couple that I wanted to have come and present, and I wanted them to come and present both together and separate classes. And guess what Great Answer did? He contacted the male top part of the couple and asked them, and when that person said yes, said, okay, yay, that's going to be it, and never contacted the other person. Now, it worked out okay for a couple of reasons. One, that other person, the partner, is an incredibly gracious and wonderful person who was very forgiving, and also acknowledged that normally that they do. He is the one who negotiates for the both of them normally, but that doesn't matter, because on my end I hold other people to the standard of saying you should do it separately, you should talk to people separately, and yet I fell right into that trap. Okay. It is, and I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, I can see exactly where I totally did the good old boy, hey dude, can you do this thing for a brother here? And then, it was like not a good situation, because I fell into that toxic masculinity, or fragile masculinity, or whatever you want to call it. It was a masculine archetype that denied her individuality, which I sit here and fight for. So constantly you need to check yourself, okay? You need to double check and say, hey, am I using this word correctly? Am I doing this kind of thing? Is this gonna, who is this affecting? And when you do that, one of the common defenses that people do, which kind of falls into the pretending you already know this stuff, is they say, well, I didn't mean that. Well, I'm happy to say that a good friend of mine spent the time and emotional labor to really sit down and explain to me the difference between intent and impact. And even if I don't mean to do something, even if I'm, just having some harmless fun, if the impact of what I'm doing is causing worse things, well, then I need to really balance those things out. Now, I'm not saying every single time the impact is going to outweigh the intent, but oftentimes it does. We saw that recently in a FetLife situation where someone had put up a slave auction event, and the advertising had a old style poster saying slave auction. Is very obviously modeled after the old slave auction posters of the American slavery movement. And they said in their whole advertising, any resemblance to a slavery thing, actual slavery, is completely coincidental, and everything that happens here is completely consensual and everything like that. Well, so their intent was just to have a little fun. Okay, their intent was to imply this sexy thing. Unfortunately, their impact was that a lot of people said, hey, there are people who, within living memory, have relatives who dealt with slavery and are still constantly being impacted by it. And so your effect that you're having, or the impact that you're having, is painful. And the person was like, well, we were just kidding, and free speech and things like that. Well, here's the thing about free speech, folks. You do have the right to have a slave auction. And Iron Temple Dog pointed this out. You totally have the right to have a slave auction. What you don't have the right to is that people won't say, hey, that's a racist thing to do. Okay? Nobody's saying you can't do it. We're just saying you have to accept that there are consequences if that happens. And that applies in a lot of different situations. Okay, I didn't intend to insult my friend by not including her in the negotiations or the upcoming thing to Ropecraft. And thankfully, the impact was minimal. But it doesn't change the fact that it was a heads up that, hey, I still got some work to do on that. So stop pretending you already know this stuff. It's a constant battle. And your best bet is to have friends who can help check in with each other. All right. So that's the 3 things that tops need to stop doing in 2019. From my perspective, you can give me your irate and I don't think this is right comments to greatanswer@gmail.com, or tell me the things that you think tops need to stop doing in 2019, and I will be happy to share them. Now, if you are identified as a bottom or as something like that, and you want to give some other demographic of these are things, I will happily broadcast your voice here. I'm just not going to speak for you because, hey, that's part of my own boundaries here. Speaking of boundaries, I was lucky enough to have Tantus Inc., that's TANTUSINC.com. You probably, if you have any kind of a collection of sex toys, you probably have a Tantus sex toy. By the way, they are not sponsors. I'm not getting paid anything to mention them here on the podcast. But they asked me to write a blog post for them and gave me permission to read it here on the podcast. So first of all, I think you should go to the site. It has a lot of really good blogs on sex ed from people like Chica William, and Black Pomegranate has it there. Great one on Rope for Everybody. Rain DeGray has stuff on there. Hardy Haberman. Neat stuff. And apparently we also have a phone that makes noise. Hey, how about we mute that? There's an idea. And it was a telemarketer anyway. Isn't that nice? All right. So I'm going to read this blog post in case you didn't get to see it. Plus, it's fun to read things. The blog post is called, by the way, I should warn you, if you go to the site and look this up, you will see my butt. They chose a naked picture of me doing yoga to illustrate this. The title of the blog post is Kinky at a Certain Age. You can still do all the things, but it costs more. Recently, I was asked what it is like being a kinkster on the far end of middle age, whatever that means. Just full disclosure, I'm going to be turning 50 years old in a few weeks. Now, the immediate answer is, great! I'm at a point in my life where my relationships have weathered enough storms to feel secure and where I can give any disapproving societal criticisms, whether from friends, family, or strangers, a happy little fuck off as I continue on my merry, kinky way. But there is a change. It's kind of insidious, the kind of thing that you sense lurking in the dark places of your life, but you're pretty sure that if you just don't look, it'll stay there, and you can pretend everything is fine. You learn to just live with that fear of whatever it is. Except you know what it is. It's the real reason doms of a certain age will savagely go online typing furious screeds against anyone younger than 21 who dares style himself a master. It's not because they really have any desire to preserve the sanctity of that word, or even because they really care at all about how skilled the young master is at their kink. No, they're yelling out of fear, because one of the key tenets of being a dominant, especially a dominant male, is the first person you need to master is yourself. And age is that monster in the shadows that reminds you, when it comes to your body, you ain't the master of nothing. The not-so-graceful decline. If you're lucky enough to discover your kink at the same time as your body's sexual and physical prime, it's truly a wonderland. You can do all the things, play with all the people, top and bottom, and switch and fuck and suck and lick until dawn, and then shower off, put on fresh clothes, and sit down at your desk the next day with a grin that might make your coworkers a little bit nervous, but none the wiser. And as I've gotten older, there has come along with it a refining of tastes. I remember a party where a young submissive came up to me saucily and declared, "My master has done 5 suspensions already this evening. How many have you done?" I smiled and agreed that he was truly a god among men, and went back to my suspensionless evening, full of dark knife play with my partner pressed against the wall. I wasn't out to prove anything, except that a couple of years later, at a big public rope exhibition, I performed 6 times over the course of a night, the last one at 4 a.m. I knew, and my partners knew, that by the end there was really nothing about performing, or rope, or even sex in what we were doing. It had become an endurance event, and like a marathon runner, I was just trying to stagger over the finish line of the last knot untied. The next day, after a few hours' sleep, I could barely walk. I literally couldn't move my fingers from the claws they'd curled into. Luckily, I didn't have to work because I couldn't type. I couldn't really even think except to say to myself, "I'm not dead yet. I can still do 6 scenes in one night." Which is proof that age does not necessarily beget wisdom. That's when I first started noticing it. Sure, I could still do the badass rope top stuff, but the price I paid for it was a lot higher than it had been a decade before. Learning to pay the piper. Now I'm well into my 3rd decade of being actively kinky, and I've learned the hard way that saying about the first person you master is exactly right. The problem is with our perception of what the word master means. Total control of another person is, for some, a really hot fantasy. A lot of people try it for real, whether for an evening or for an entire relationship, with varying levels of success, usually proportionate to the amount of time they spend preparing and practicing for it. The same thing goes for my body. I know that, yes, I can do that rough body play scene with my lover at the club, where I'm holding her against the bench with one hand while I'm fisting her with the other, my boot holding tension on the rope that's lifting her lovely ass in the air. The next morning, though, before I can move, I'm going to be doing at least a half hour of yin yoga, which, if you're not familiar with it, pretty much involves laying on the ground for long stretches of breathing. I know that I had better schedule that hot scene for earlier in the evening because both me and my lover have jobs to be at in the morning. I know that my own libido is going to be directly tied into whether or not I did my weightlifting regimen that day. All the jokes about how easy it is to get a guy off tend to leave out the reality that there comes an age when it's really not. Then again, I better make sure I didn't work out too late in the day or my muscles will still be sore and or tired, and that also is the not fun kind of orgasm control. Regardless, the next day I will be sore and tired, and I accept that. It's what I mean about the cost. It's like when I was younger, thinking that it was sexy when my lover and I had fucked with such wanton abandon that our pubic bones were bruised. Now it's more about fucking it all, regardless of level of wanton, and it's my whole body, and still worth it. Show your work. When I was a younger kinkster, I took a lot of classes and read a lot of books on being a dominant, and this kind of stuff wasn't really talked about. Or maybe I just didn't pay attention to it because, like most people, I was busy enjoying the body I had. And I still do. One of the side benefits of standard issue cis white guy confidence is a strange sort of body dysmorphia. Namely, I still feel like the hard-charging U.S. Marine, even if my body doesn't still look like it. On the one hand, that makes it a shock when I see a candid photo of myself. Where did that belly come from? Or that extra chin? On the other hand, it gives me a kind of a flashlight against that monster lurking in the dark corners. Admittedly, I have a kind of warped response to fear. I was a volunteer EMT, a U.S. Marine, and a single father of 4 daughters. It's pretty established that running towards things that scare me is kind of an ingrained habit. I'll post my naked #Yelfies, yoga selfies, paunch and all. I'll talk about blood pressure and medication and depression and struggles with weight and prostate exams and more, because my strength as a dominant lies not in perfection, but in vulnerability. Yes, I am mortal. I have flaws and weaknesses, and so what? I'm still here. My lovers and friends are still here with me. That's real strength. That's my dominance. Controlling how I react to the things I can't control. Is my body falling apart? Hell yeah. Just like everyone else's, slowly but surely. And I'm going to do my best to both preserve it with boring yoga and painful weights and the occasional cold walk through a Wisconsin winter, and also to exploit the hell out of it, staying up late doing strange and twisted and wonderful things with my lovers and friends like any respectable kinkster. Just not too late, okay? I got to work in the morning. All right. Well, that's the blog post. Hope you enjoyed the dramatic reading, and I'd love to hear back from you. As I promised, this is a half hour of me blathering on, and we are about that point. So thank you, all of my Patreon patrons. We will be sending you some visual practitioner stuff and some sketches that I've been working on. And also, you can go to, if you want to be a patron too, you can be there at patreon.com/greatanswer. Didn't link that before. Bad, Gray. We'll fix that in post too. No, we won't. We also want to thank twistedmonk.com for his continued support of the podcast, as well as leeallure.com, who I will be meeting with in a short while, because not only does she support the podcast, but she and I both kind of keep each other accountable for our various projects. So if you have any comments or questions, you can always visit me at greatanswer@gmail.com. My website is greatanswer.com, and I'm easy to find on Twitter, not on Facebook anymore. Done with the Facebooks. Sorry, but Facebook's tendencies were a little bit too much to take. So, and meanwhile, I will be here in the bondage capital of the world, Madison, Wisconsin. That's some good rope.